Haverty's here?
Yeah, Paul's here. He's zooming, right?
Listened to the last meeting, and the audio was horrible.
In the beginning, it was terrible. And that's why
I think,
We're getting feedback.
yeah, are we getting feedback now?
Yep.
So.
Shut off the speakers on one of them.
Me. Okay, now, you still getting it?
Nope, that's good.
That's what I did. There was something else that was on that shouldn't have been on.
He's coming in here, or is he going on Zoom?
He's on Zoom. Are you good, Doug?
All right, seeing it is 7 o'clock, Wednesday, June 9th. I'm going to still read it. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 38-18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. We are doing a hybrid meeting, some live and some on Zoom. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia and is being conducted in person in room 204, the town offices, and we will continue with the Zoom links for the public until further notice. The call-in to the meeting number is 929-205-6099. And we, first up, we're going to be continuing the public hearing for 200 Turnpike Road. All-Star Management LLC requests a special permit per section 195-5, use regulations in attachment 1, use table to operate a 2,800 square foot doggy care commercial kennel, special permit per section 195-18 to reduce the parking, and section 195-144C to reduce the buffer strips and any other zoning relief that is deemed necessary. The site is located in the IA Limited Industrial District and consists of approximately 3.85 acres, as shown on the assessor's map. Do we have, I know that we stopped the meeting last time with,
Abruptly. Sorry
yeah,
about that.
abruptly. I guess, do you want to finish off, Phil, and then we'll get going?
Yes.
I should let you know I did take and listen to as much as I could. So,
As much as
killing your ears?
existed.
much as existed, so I'm allowed to come in.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name's, for the record, Philip Iliopoulos. I'm an attorney here in Chelmsford at law offices at 9 North Road. Good to see everyone in person after a 15-month hiatus, so one nice thing about tonight. I want to just let you know, my client, Tice, will not be here tonight. Her daughter got in a car accident this afternoon. She's at the hospital. She's okay, but they're running tests. So I told her not to worry about coming tonight. So I'm well prepared. I can answer any questions you have, but I just didn't want you to take that as something that she wasn't interested to be here. But everything is okay, I think. Just a little background, and I'm going to try to be quick because I want to invite our acoustic engineer up really to address the sound issue, because I think in many ways it probably comes down to that. My sense is that the biggest concern that the abutters have is related to sound. And that's something we've taken seriously with this board. When we started this project, the license in Chelmsford allowed us to have up to 100 dogs, and we were thinking about 50, 60 dogs at that time for that facility. We looked at other facilities, we looked at our plan, and we felt it wasn't going to be a problem. Some of the board members went to other doggy daycare sites to listen, and you know, my feeling is, or my memory is that even the board members that did that didn't hear excessive barking. But nevertheless, we set up a site visit with the abutters to see if we could make them feel more comfortable with that issue. I know that the abutters felt disappointed with the meeting because we still decided at the end to move forward with the project. The meeting wasn't, from our perspective, whether to move forward or not. It was to how to make the project better. And to that end, we were contacted by Doug DeShane, their attorney at the time, asking us not to move forward with a vote at that next meeting following the abutter site visit, but to work on, our commitment. What we had committed to was to try to incorporate some sound mitigation techniques, so that if the dogs were barking, or if there were several dogs barking on Zoom with the board, talked about what we were doing, updated the board, we were going to hire a sound consultant, in fact we had at the time, and that we weren't going to seek a vote. We had prepared, through our sound consultant, Jeff Comroe, who's here tonight, a mitigation plan. And the mitigation plan, actually, you're going to hear tonight, is a plan that will seek to limit the impact on abutters if there are 10 dogs in the outside area, all barking at the same time, uncontrolled. Okay, so both sound reports that you might hear tonight deal with the doomsday scenario, all the dogs barking at once, and no one there to control it. If you remember, we committed to the board to limit the number of dogs outside at any one time to no more than 10. And also to ensure that we always have someone outside with the dogs. They will never be unattended. If there's a dog that starts to bark and the dog can't be controlled, the dog's going to be brought inside. Simple as that. We don't want, I know the abutters probably don't feel that we're being good neighbors, and I can't necessarily change their opinion of that. But we don't want to be bad neighbors, and we don't want the animal control officer getting called every other day, or the police coming by every other day. Nobody wants to live in that situation, and our client doesn't want to run her business that way. So if there's a dog that barks, the dog goes in if they can't be stopped. It's as simple as that. They will never be unattended. We presented at the last meeting our sound mitigation plan to the board. We also, at Nancy's recommendation, agreed to limit the dogs now to no more than 40 on site. So that will be the maximum. It won't start off that high either. The dogs will get dropped off, 40 trips into the building during the morning, and then 40 trips in the afternoon when they get picked up. We don't feel traffic will be an issue. As I had put in my report to the board prior to our last meeting, we got traffic counts. The most recent traffic counts on Turnpike Road show traffic around 3,400 trips per day. So we may add 80 trips, but again, keep in mind, if we weren't using it for this use, we'd be using it for another use, which would have its employees, customers coming in and out as well. So 40 in, 40 out, maybe that would be 25 in, 25 out if it was a different use, or 20 in, 20 out. It's not going to be an impact on traffic. We also wanted to address the concern that was raised about smells. We're going to treat the dog waste much like they treat waste at human daycare facilities. So everything will be packaged up, put in a enclosed container. It will be enclosed before it goes into a fenced-in trash compactor. And so it'll be handled in an appropriate way. And again, if you visited other dog daycare facilities, you don't get out of your car and smell waste. It's handled very appropriately. I also put in my report to the board the enforcement mechanisms that the town has if those issues surface. There are actually specific bylaws, nuisance bylaws in towns that deal with sound, that actually deal with dog waste. And so if things are not being handled appropriately, which they will be, but if the worst concerns arise, the town has the ability to monitor that and enforce that. And I'm glad to see town council here, because town council certainly can tell the board that if the decibel levels go too high, if there's a nuisance issue, that can be addressed through the town's bylaws. At the end of the presentation, what I'd like to do is go through just the specific special permit criteria, because we haven't really focused a lot on that. I thought before I do that, I'll invite Jeff, I think, to come up, if that's okay, and give a 5 or 10 minute sort of presentation to the board on sound, because I would try to do it, but it's a little bit above my pay grade, okay? Would that be all right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Jeff Comrower. I am a senior engineer with a company called Noise Control Engineering, and I've been in the noise and vibration business for approximately 42 years and quieted down anything from aircraft carriers to currently Hoover Dam to factories to internal and external. Been involved in many numerous environmental issues. So before I start, I'd like to actually ask a question. It's sometimes difficult for people without an acoustics background, and even with some people with an acoustics background, to understand some of the analysis and some of the terms. So if you'd like, I've got a handout that I've prepared that has a basic, like 5 or 6 slides on going through some basics of acoustics, because if you don't kind of understand the basics, it might be hard to follow, and it might make things a little easier if I could start doing that, if that's okay with the board.
Be great, yeah.
Is that good?
Appreciate that.
Okay. I've got a couple extras, if any of the, I assume there's some residents here. If anybody wants one, I'll hand it out to the board first. Don't want that one. That one, thank you. Yes, no? Good? Thank you. Okay, so hopefully I will not put you to sleep.
We got one more board member here if you want. We had somebody else sneak in on you.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is just go through just a couple of basic concepts. I've got like 5 slides that, and then I'll get into the analysis that I did. So when we talk about noise, we typically talk about the decibel. I think that's the term that most people understand. Well, the question is, what is a decibel? And why do we use something called a decibel? So when we do a measurement, or when we talk about noise, what we're actually measuring is something called sound pressure level. All right, in other words, an atmosphere, pounds per square inch, newtons per meter squared. That's the actual physical measurement that we're doing. And if you look at the ear has a very wide range of what we can hear if you've got good hearing, unlike me, unfortunately, even though I'm in the industry. Okay, so 0 dB is, the actual measurement is 20 micropascals, 10 to the minus 6, all right? And there's an equation here, don't worry about it, but if you look at the sound pressure level equation, the decibel is a logarithmic scale. So 0 dB is basically the threshold of hearing. And 20 pascals, so 0 pascals, 10 to the minus 6 pascals, 0 dB is the threshold of hearing. We can hear up to essentially the threshold of pain, which is about 20 pascals, or a factor of roughly 1 million. This is very hard to get your head around. So, we created the dB scale, which is a decibel scale, and we typically look at things in the decibel scale. So just some basic concepts. If you're talking about an actual doubling of pressure, you're only talking about 6 dB. So when people tell you, well, you know, it only went up 3 or 4 dB or 5 dB, that's a lot. So 6 dB is actually a doubling of pressure. Now, since our ear is not really more qualitative than quantitative, the perception of sounds that we hear. So again, 0 dB is the threshold of hearing. That's about 20 micropascals. If you go to like a sound studio, a very quiet studio, that would be roughly 20 dB. If you go to a typical residential area, that would be maybe 40 dB. A typical retail office space, I do a lot of shipboard work, so a berth or a pilot house would be 60 dB. 65 dB is about the threshold of normal conversation. Once you get into a lawnmower, vacuum cleaner, you're up around 80 dB. Noisy factory floor would be around 85 to 95 dB. Anything above 85 dB in a factory environment, you have to wear hearing protection according to OSHA. All right? 120 dB, which would be a jet takeoff at a fair distance. That's the threshold of pain. And a Saturn rocket takeoff would be 140 dB. That would be instant hearing damage if you're exposed to that without hearing protection. So that's kind of like the range of what we're talking about. Okay? Next page. So again, this is another equation, and I want to give you an idea about the relationship of decibels as far as distance. So sound pressure, whether it be in decibels or just the units, is a function of distance from the source. So the rule of thumb, actually not the rule of thumb, the equation says that for every doubling of distance, you lose 6 dB. So the sound reduces by 6 dB to your ear every doubling of distance. So if I'm next to a machine that's at 90 dB and I'm at 1 foot away or 1 meter away, I move to 2 meters away, I'm hearing 84 dB. If I go to 4 meters away, I'm hearing 78 dB. So every doubling of distance, you decrease 6 dB of what you're hearing. All right, and this is fundamental to the calculations that we're doing for, you know, the noise levels at property lines and things like that. The second thing is going to be related to the number of sources. So decibels do not add linearly. Unlike mathematics, it's a logarithmic scale. So if I have a 90 dB, if I have two 90 dB sources, if I have one source, I'm hearing 90 dB at a certain distance. If I have a second source, those two sources combined add 3 dB. So now I'm hearing 93 dB. If I have 5 sources, I add 5 dB. I add 7 dB. So now I'd be hearing 97. If I have 10 of those sources that are 90 dBA, I'd be hearing 100 dB. You add 10 dB. So that's here for reference as to how you add decibels. All right, next little slide. And this is important because you can be in a situation, if you're in a reverberant space where sound bounces around, where I could actually be hearing a noise level louder than the actual source. Because what happens is, if you look at this picture, if I have a speaker at 90 dB and I'm in a room that's like totally concrete, or the wall by the the dog kennel, if I'm there and that sound has a direct path to me at 90 dB, then it bounces off the wall, hits me again, that's like 2 sources. So I could be in a situation, if I'm a reverberant room, where I'm listening to something that's much louder than the actual source because I've got reflections off the wall that act as an additional source. All right? That could be important. Next slide. I put this in here because if you look at the calculations, what you see is the source is defined typically for a machine. If you look at most manufacturer specifications, it could be defined as what's called sound power. Now, sound power is different than sound pressure. The reason why sound power is different is sound power does not depend on distance. So in other words, a machine has an inherent noise characteristic, and it's related to the amount of energy that comes through the area around the machine. That's the sound power. So if I've got a machine that's a sound power of, say, 90 dBA, that is not necessarily related to pressure, you have to do a calculation to figure out what the pressure is. And the way you do that, everything we do is measured in the pressure, the dBA with the pressure, but if the machine is specified in sound power, you've got to relate that to the pressure. And this is how you do it. There's a formula there. Again, don't worry about the formula. The bottom line is Q is called a directivity. So if I'm in a space with no walls, with nothing, I'm just in free space, Q is going to be 1. If I've got one surface that, like, if I've got a machine on a concrete pad, that sound could bounce on the concrete pad to the microphone I'm trying to measure the sound pressure from, that's going to act as another source. My Q is going to be 2. So the bottom line is if you're 1 meter away from your source and you're in a totally non-reverberant space, the difference between sound power and sound pressure is 11 dB. Okay? So if I've got a 106 dB source and I'm in a totally open field, my sound pressure level is going to be 95. So in a lot of instances in the calculations you'll see, a lot of these barrier calculations use sound power, not sound pressure. So if the dogs are 95 dBA, I've got to convert that to sound power before I can put it into the equations that I use for the barrier calculations. And this is how it's related, so for your reference. All right, so that is all I have for basic acoustics. Any questions? Go ahead, Mike.
I have one thing, I actually know the answer, but I think it might be useful for others.
Okay,
When you have multiple sources,
yes,
you are assuming that the sound from those sources are simultaneous. In other words, you had two sources, they have to be making noise at the same time in order to get your 3 dB.
correct. Well, at the same time and at the same distance.
Yeah, same time, same distance, all of that.
Correct.
It works just like RF, I guess.
Yep.
And so if you have, say, 5, we'll use dogs because that's the discussion here. You have 5 dogs. If they do a synchronous woof, and all 5 of them bark at the same time,
Yeah, it's 7
you
dB.
got 7 dB.
Correct.
If they go woof, 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 you don't have any change at all.
That's right.
It has to be simultaneous because you're looking at instantaneous sound power or sound pressure.
Right, and distance also matters. So
Distance
if one-
matters in
if
all
one
cases,
dog
yeah.
is at the very middle of the pen, and another dog is, say, twice the distance from the wall
Oh,
of
yeah,
that
it's going to
pen.
be almost unnoticeable.
Right,
increase,
right. Well,
yeah.
it says you lose 3 dB per distance, but then
Yeah.
you can add 2 dB because
Yeah.
to the receiver, it's hitting the receiver at a slightly different level.
Yep.
So if you have a 90 to 93, 3 dB apart, essentially says you add 1 dB.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because arguments about if you have 10 dogs, you must have 10 dB more. No.
Right.
Not unless you've got a very well-trained set of dogs that'll all bark at the exact same 100 milliseconds.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so leading up, yes.
I have a stupid question. Because in this situation, we do have these dogs down in a contained hard wall area. So we're talking about reflections as well. In terms of sound reflections being additive, with those dimensional shifts, I mean, do you end up with the phase shifts that you get with RF in your addition? Yeah, with the interference? I mean, are they truly additive if they're bouncing
In
up?
the worst case, they are. All right. Realistically, probably not.
I can't imagine how they could be,
No.
you know?
No. Realistically, there's
Because
going
of
to
the
be some.
distance change and phase differential.
Yeah, there's going to be some constructive
Yeah.
and destructive interference.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, that in this case, that's not going to be a situation because part of the plan is to actually, you could have a situation where those dogs would hit the building and bounce off. Because of the wall, it's going to be in the shadow zone of the barrier anyway, so it's not really going to affect. But even if it does, there's part of the noise plan is to use absorption material on any of the hard surfaces.
At which
So
point it's
along
not
the
reflecting.
concrete wall, along the building, make it nice. We could do a lot of stuff. So the idea is to put absorption material there so that you don't get the reflection, so that you don't add to the sound level that whatever the dogs are making, and it doesn't get out of the enclosure. So that's part of the assumption in the I guess what you presented, right? I mean, that's not part of my calculations. I assume no reflections because of that.
Because of that.
Right.
Be-
So what I
because-
did.
Because the reflections are buffered.
Yes, all right, so,
Yeah.
I used a barrier tool based on ISO standards, all right? It's the same, there's many different ways of doing it, there's more complicated things. There's programs called, Sound Plan, there's a program called CADNA, that if you're doing a complicated situation, takes into account atmospheric effects, which this does, ground effects, whether it's a soft ground, hard ground, whether you get reflections, takes into account barriers, multiple barriers. I used a relatively simple tool because we really have a simple situation here. So if you look at the next one, which is slide 7, this is actually one that is in my report. And the way this tool works is, like I said, on the left side under multi-spectrum, that's my source. So you see that source is in sound power, and I went over how I calculated sound power from sound pressure. So I basically initially assumed 90 dBA for the dogs, but then I went up to 95, so this sound power is actually around 95 dBA sound pressure level. All right, and then what you do is you put in the barrier, so you put in the location of where you're assuming your source is, you put in the barrier, you put in the height of the barrier, you put in where your receiver is, the height of the receiver, you put in the distances, and this goes through and essentially tells you what the predicted sound source level is going to be at the receiver location. Okay, so initially I did this, and you see the dogs, I had 1 meter. I had a 4.3 meter barrier, which is the concrete barrier plus the sound fence. And then I predicted the noise level at the property line. And somebody pointed out that, I believe it was Dave, I think. Is that you, Dave? No? Anyway. But I think one of the residents pointed out, that, hey, I used 1.5 meter when in actuality, the property line is actually higher because you're going up. So if you look at and before I move on, what I predicted at the property line was 43.5 dBA, okay, which is pretty low. All right, so if you go to the next one, page 8, I said, okay, let me see what the difference is if I actually went up in height and maybe was a little bit more realistic that I didn't realize the height difference of where the property line was. So I went up to 4 meters, which is about the height of the top of the barrier, which I believe is probably conservative. I think the street level is probably going to be low the top of that barrier. But anyway, I went up 4 meters, and it made a big difference of roughly, actually that's not true. What happened was I also moved back to the back of the fence. When I just upped the barrier, it made a difference of about less than 1 decibel,
Yeah.
which is not perceivable. All right, when I went to the back of the fence, initially I assumed the center of the area, and then somebody also pointed out, well, what if the dogs are all the way in the back of the fence, which I believe was about 45 feet from the front. So I went back, and I assumed all the dogs were barking at once. So that prediction there came up to roughly 47 dBA for one source. If I've got 10 dogs barking all at once, at the worst case at the back of the fence, that brings me up to 57 dBA. That's still below 60 dBA. So what are the chances of all the dogs going to be at the back of the fence all barking at once? Okay, whatever. So that's how I essentially did the calculation. Then I did a calculation at the actual residence location, all right, because you don't care about the property line, you care about what's going to happen at your house. And I came up and I even said, okay, let's see about the second story window. And if you look at the picture, it's still all in the shadow zone, all right? So what happens is you make the calculation, and now I come up with, because you have further distance, the level's going to be lower, all right? You're still in a shadow zone. I came up with a prediction at the house, which was actually lower, at about 45 dBA, all right? So the bottom line is, if you look in my memo, which I have in front of me somewhere, based on these calculations, even with the worst-case scenario, my professional opinion is that any noise is going to be less than traffic noise, because typically traffic noise in a street like that with relatively moderate to heavy traffic and truck traffic, if you did a long-term monitoring situation, you would probably establish a background level in the 50s at least. So my opinion is I do not think there's going to be any sort of a problem with the kennel with up to 10 dogs, which they're probably not going to have 10 dogs at once based on the owner's conversation with myself. The same for the property line. If I remember the property line for the industrial, it's an industrial zone, it was zone 70 dBA. Even that close property line with the barrier up as high as we predicted at the property line, you're not going to have a problem. You're going to be well under the 70 dBA. I think that's in my memo. That's kind of all I got.
Is that with your, with what you're gonna be doing to it, your modifications, or is, you know, how you said you have a plan that you're gonna put into place, is that what you're talking about? These numbers come up with your plan in effect?
Right, well, this, yeah, well, this assumes no reflections. So, and essentially, yes. So if we put the absorption material on the concrete underneath the fence and on the building, you're not gonna get any reflections. Even if you are gonna get reflections, it's really not gonna affect the sound level, but I assume no reflections because of the absorption material. You're not gonna get reflections off the building that are really going to affect any noise levels, I believe, at any of the property lines or at the residences.
Okay, do you want to bring around the board if you have any questions for him before he sits down? Is anybody, Deidre?
Well, I was just reading earlier today, which I don't know if you saw, there was another noise letter
Yep.
that came up with quite different numbers, and I hadn't had a chance to look at yours, so I never was able to,
I don't know where they came up with those numbers, quite frankly, because we use the same input. So we use roughly, you know, they were assuming 95 dBA. Dog's not going to bark. I mean, a typical dog is really around 90 dBA. But even if you say, you know, they're all going to bark at 95 dBA. They were coming up with, I think, 65 dBA. There's nothing I could fit. Well, one thing I think of is, if you look in there, they assume like ground reflections, which they assume reflections. They said something about bouncing off of buildings. If you're talking about bouncing off the near building, maybe, but again, the absorption. If you're talking about bouncing off other buildings, the distance of the path doesn't make any sense for them to add any dBA. But the other thing that they were going to do is they're going to put like very soft material and kind of like an outdoor carpet on completely covering the concrete. So you're going to eliminate any reflections that I think they have in the model. They assume, I believe, a hard concrete surface. I can't tell because there's really nothing in that report that I could look at as to how they came up with that number. But I did the same calculation with the same type of tool that's to the same standard, and I came up with completely different numbers. So I've ran it a number of times, a number of different ways, and I still come up with roughly, you know, 47 dBA for one source, 57 for one, which would be for 10, which would be under the 60 dBA.
Do you have any questions, Lance?
No, it looks pretty straightforward to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I wondered, I went through both reports and struggled with how the difference arose. And the only thing I could find, and I think I interpreted it correctly, they seemed to start with a value somewhere in the range of 106 dB.
Again,
And then they added 7 dB for 5 dogs, which I think has got a validity problem as well, unless they're synchronized barking.
if you read it again,
Yeah.
I believe they had 106 dBA was the sound power level.
Okay, so they were doing it with sound power. Got it. Okay, that then I understand.
Can I make a point of order?
You'll get
for
it,
today?
you'll get a chance. You definitely will get a
A
chance.
point of order in terms of this.
No, you'll get a
There's
chance.
an
We're
order
gonna-
to how this gets handled.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, that was it. I just wondered.
I think I can verify that.
You know what, if we could specifically, let's just
Yeah.
leave our questions for
Okay.
him, and then when we have the other, then give them a chance to speak, and then we'll ask questions of him. Is that fair? Erica?
Sound power level 106 dBA, so they're using
Okay,
the
good.
same numbers.
I'm good.
I got one quick, I did say no, but I do have one. Have you seen the site?
I have seen pictures, I have
Okay.
not seen the
So,
actual
so there's a
site.
big hill there that goes up.
Mhm.
What's the loudest of an 18-wheeler gets? The revving the engine, trying to get up that hill?
You're over 100 dBA.
100 dBA.
Between 95, if they put the jack brake on, it could go up to 110.
I mean,
But if you're just
a
coming
truck
down
going-
the street, you're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 to 100.
So when a regular truck's going down any street, no hill, they're at 80?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I'm not a sound expert, but I think I just would want everyone to understand, all these calculations are based off of 10 dogs barking simultaneously and no one stopping it. And again, I just want the board to know that will not happen. I just want to breeze through because the board, if we're fortunate enough to get support for this project, certainly has to base it off of the special permit criteria set forth in the state and in the bylaw. So I'm going to just go through it quickly. Some of these things I've talked about, social, economic, community needs. I talked about how pet ownership has skyrocketed over the years, and actually especially the last year or two with COVID especially, people have used that time to purchase dogs. 53% of Americans have dogs, which I thought was interesting. In Massachusetts, 1 in 3 households minimum have a dog. Chelmsford, according to the dog enforcement officer, there are over 5,000 dogs registered in the town of Chelmsford, which I found really stunning. I wasn't expecting it to be that high. It was like 5,400, but he assumed that some of them maybe have passed away in the town. They haven't told the town, so it could be closer to 5,000. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that, set that out there. I'm aware of 3 commercial doggy daycares in Chelmsford for 5,000 dogs. So I think there is a social economic need. I've had my dog at a rough house, and they can't take them on the weekends. They're always booked up. They're maxed out. They won't accept new dogs. There's not a surplus of availability out there. Traffic flow, safety, parking, and loading. It's an existing building. The parking is not going to change. There'll be some removal of spaces where we're going to put the outdoor pen, and that's one of our special permit requests. But in terms of traffic, really, which I think is the big issue, I've talked about that. I see no impact at all on Turnpike Road by this project. Adequacy of utilities and other public services. Again, the town's existing. It already has all public utilities, water, sewer, electric, so that won't change. We looked at, and the town looked at the sewer capacity issue, and the town felt that based on the sewer capacity in this particular use, they wanted us to limit the number of internal dog kennels or crates to 16, which we've agreed to do. I've put that in letter format, submitted it to the town. So that will prevent us from affecting any sewer impact issues. So the 40 dogs is what we've agreed to maximize in terms of any one time. The 16 crates or kennels might be a situation where a dog just needs to eat lunch, and you can't feed it with all the other dogs circling their dog food, so you put it in its own crate to eat lunch, let's say. So there'd be 16 of those at a max. With regards to neighborhood character and structure, obviously I think the biggest one is the sound issue, and we've talked about that, and so I won't belittle that point. I'm happy to go over with the board the specific things. I've put it in my memo to you about 2 meetings ago, what specific things we're going to incorporate to do the sound mitigation. It's in Jeff's report as well, but I'm happy to recite that later if the board wants to make sure they get that on the record. Impacts to the natural environment, we see none. Again, we're going to treat the waste by in a stored container in the building. The waste will come inside, go in the stored container, be properly removed through the trash, and it will be protected in the right material. Fiscal impact to the town, certainly it'll bring open a new business in town with several employees. We can talk about that. I think that's actually a good piece, because I did talk to Tice about that this week. There are no real requirements or standards in terms of how many humans you should have in a doggy daycare. And most of them run 1 person for every 20 to 25 dogs. So when you see a big facility, you might have 3 or 4 people there at any one time. She's looking to have 1 person for every 5 to 10 dogs. So you would always have a minimum of 2 people, because you have to have someone that's available if the other person's dealing with a barking dog outside. So there'd always be no less than 2 people, even if you had just 5 dogs or 10 dogs that day. But if the number goes up, she'll have a staff person for every 5 to 10. She does it solely because she thinks that's what's in the best interest of the dogs, is to have that ratio. There is legislation going through the state to try to help actually bring some standards to that, and she would welcome that and obviously follow any standards that come her way. And she also commits, again, we're not going away. If this gets approved, there are issues, we're happy to meet with the neighbors, we're happy to come back to this board, and certainly the town can deal with us appropriately as the bylaws and the laws will allow for. So that's sort of a quick glance at the special permit criteria that I think we can meet all that criteria for the board tonight. Any questions?
Just to clarify something, you said the minimum of 1 to 5, but what would be the minimum? Would you have 2 for minimum?
Minimum
staff?
of 2 people, absolutely. Even if there's 3 dogs in the facility, we have to have 2 people, partly because if someone's coming to pick up a dog, you still have to have someone with the other dogs. So we'll never have less than 2 people. This business is going to be run by Thais, by her daughter, and they're going to have other staff there. But I wanted to get a sense of what the ratio was because I thought that was important. And she just thinks that that's the proper ratio, is 1 person for every 5 to 10 dogs. Why do we have that range? Well, let's say there's 8 dogs. She'd have 2 people there. If there's 14 dogs, she'd probably have 3. It gets to be a little bit complicated. So it's and it also depends on the dogs. You get to know the dogs at your facility. And so every dog will get screened, and if there's dogs that are a problem, there's plenty of other dogs she can have there. There'll be a lot of, I think, demand for this. So if there are problem dogs, then those are dogs that probably won't be asked to stay. Okay. Any other questions?
Can you clarify, the past couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Just so confused, and I think some of the board members understand it. Is she the owner of the building and the owner of this business?
Yes. Yep, she's 100% owner of the building, and she will be the operator and owner of this business.
And is my understanding that the main entrance on that main floor is going to be the same entrance for the other tenants as well as the dogs going in?
So when you go in the main entrance, think of it like a vestibule. You can go, almost like a split level.
Yeah.
You can go up to the 2nd level or go down to the 1st level. The welcoming area for the dogs will be down on the 1st level, and that will only be for the dogs. With regards to the other units, their main access point will be around the building.
Mm-hmm.
They can each access the unit through their bays. There's garage doors and doors. They can also access the upstairs of their unit, because the units are 2 floors, by going up and through the common hallway upstairs.
Oh, okay.
But all the dogs will be going directly down to the 1st floor.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, does the attorney want to speak, or?
Mr. Hausler?
Attorney Hausler?
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is, for the record, Doug Hausler, representing Milestone Estates Condominium through its Board of Trustees. This is an interesting application. Using the words of the applicant's own attorney, the very first things we're talking about are how to limit the impact on the abutters. And he doesn't want animal officers or police to have to come every day because of nuisance complaints. And he talks about doomsday scenarios where there are 10 dogs outside at any one time. That's not what I think is what we're looking to accomplish through a special permit. And it goes directly to the issue of neighborhood character and social structures in particular, as well as whether that is something that is going to benefit the social economic and community needs, which is going to be served by this proposal. I am unaware of any application recently where, as I understand it, every single abutter is opposed to this. And it's my understanding that there have been more than 70 or 80 signatures of petitioners stating their strong opposition to this application. This is not a retail area. This is an industrial area. What this is a retail use in the most inappropriate area based on what the neighbors feel, certainly. And I hope what you consider is what the neighbors are concerned about here. This was a manufacturing facility. It was not a retail area. It's not designed traffic-wise to allow a lot of retail in and out. It wasn't designed that way. It was designed for industrial employment. Interesting other comment by counsel for the applicant. If issues arise, there are nuisance regulations that can be imposed. What that is a prediction that there's going to be nuisance regulations needing to be monitored and carefully watched, which now makes these neighbors on a day-to-day basis listening to dogs barking and having to decide whether it's at a level strong enough that they want to have the town animal officer or the police show up. That is not something that our town needs. And I can assure you that it is not something any of the abutters who have lived there for years want to have across the street. The location of the facility itself, this particular aspect or use, is in the front of the building closest to the residential abutters, not furthest away. And you couple that with the applicant's original application, which has been mentioned several times, where they were going to start with 100 dogs, and they're now down to 40. Respectfully, if I was going to be looking for a special permit, I think I would do my investigation ahead of time and not be asking for 100 and so quickly going down to 40. It shows that there hasn't been a lot of real due diligence and thought processes about how did the abutters get affected by the reduction of 100 to 40. Why would somebody propose 100 and now they're saying 40, and even with 40, they're using terms like need to limit impact, doomsday scenarios, nobody wants nuisances with 40. So it wasn't carefully thought out. I don't think you've heard any evidence that allows you to really use your discretion in a reasonable way to grant an application for a special permit. This is not a permit of right. It's only issued if they satisfy the criteria. The applicant has not done that. A few other comments that there were, the idea of, is there a social, economic, or community need? Respectfully, as much as I like counsel for the applicant, his personal opinion is not evidence. And I quote, "I think there is a need." Well, guess what? Unfortunately, that is just an opinion. That's not a fact. And there are no facts that have been presented that I'm aware of that show that there's an actual need. Yes, there were citations to how many dogs there were. That's wonderful stuff. There is no specific factual data submitted that I'm aware of showing that there is a need for this kind of facility. And personal opinion just doesn't meet that burden. You know, we're looking for objective criteria to be applied here, not opinions. The fact that they have to bring a noise engineer in tells you where this is going to wind up, how it's going to affect these neighbors. I will let them speak for themselves in that regard. There are people who are in the audience, including the chairman of the Board of Trustees, they have arranged for their own noise engineer to come in because they're that concerned. And I think that's an important element as well, that this board needs to consider, that these neighbors have spent an extraordinary amount of time and money in opposition to this particular application. They feel that strongly that their neighborhood character is going to be significantly impacted. So I ask you to use the criteria that are within 195, 103 for special permits. When you analyze all of them, it just doesn't meet those criteria. And I ask that you just literally deny this special permit application on behalf of my client, or in this case, clients multiple, because there are a number of families involved. In order not to be redundant, I'm going to allow other people to address noise issues and such, and how they feel about how it's going to impact them directly. I just want to go after the legal side of the fact that the criteria does not appear to have been met here. And you're just going to wind up creating truly a nuisance environment. So I'll pass it on through the chair to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, do we have any letters that we want to read in, and then we'll go to the public?
We have one letter from the Center Water District, and it has no comments, no concerns.
Okay, excellent. So we'll open up to the public. If you want to come up and state your name and address. And if you could, I'd just ask you to, limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Obviously, if you have new stuff, feel free to
Respectfully,
speak.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have a little bit more time to present since we have
Yeah, I was
substantial
I'm
information.
saying that, yep. And I'm just asking to be respectful to the others, and that's it. So.
Do people have a copy of this submitted report?
Yeah, electronic.
Yeah, I've got-
Very well.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order, that report, if that's the report that came in at 8:39 o'clock last night, is certainly not a timely submission. Just for the record.
Okay, got it.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is David Lasky. I live at 3 Milestone Avenue. I am chairman of the Milestone Estates Trust. One of the questions that one of the comments that sort of came up just in the last presentation was, how can we have so much variation in noise between the reports? So the first thing I would like to address is, if you look at the original sound report that was submitted, respectfully, that report came in at 40 dBA. Just from questions I raised, that has now increased by over 20%. So that sort of gives you an idea of what we're talking about and how much variability there is with this noise. So on the first page of the report that I submitted to you, the noise tools that was used to generate the noise report that was submitted has a lot of assumptions. We have basically an open area that's got barriers, and you have open space. There will be noise that goes around the barrier. There will be noise that goes around it. Your building is 35 feet high. There'll be sound that reflects over the barrier from that, as well as there are also some accuracies that are mentioned in the tool that weren't addressed. One of those is complicated reflective paths, which I just mentioned. The other one is the directivity of the noise. So a dog barking is more directive than just a general sound being emitted. And the other part is variability in the height of the land. So if you look at what our property is, and you look at the original sound presentation, it was on a flat plane. Where actually, if you look at the measurement to where our second story window, where most of our time is spent in our residence, that's 8.3 meters high. So if you look at the difference of what that generates, just changing that path alone resulted in a 20 to 30% increase. The other part that's not calculated into this software and the propagation is the fact that you then have a reflective hill that is going up. So it's one thing to have a measured height where you have a valley in between where the receiver is and everything else. It's another thing when you're traveling along a path of ground that's also going to act as reflection. So that just sort of gives you an idea of this basic software that has a lot of assumptions that are laid out on this first page. There's a lot of things that don't apply, and so you see a best case scenario when it comes to sound. So initially then on the first page, that's the original, on page 3, the original one that was presented that showed 40 dB. And again, when I pointed out saying that our height is higher and that if you move the dogs to the back, that resulted in a 20% increase just from that alone. We then have an issue when we talk about the actual dogs themselves. So the original source of the 90 dB that was presented came from reference.com. I actually used a source that's higher, which said 100 to 110, and that's from the Applied Animal Behavioral Science, and that was from a report is the noise in dog kennels. So my numbers generating the noise of a dog actually comes from scientific studies that are measuring the noise of dogs in kennels and these type of things, not just reference.com. Another point of fact, just to show just exactly, I measured my King Charles, or my sister's King Charles, Bella, she was 98 dB. We measured Rory, my neighbor's, there was 103 dB. So there's just two dogs that we've measured that are significantly higher than the quote-unquote the 90 dB that are measured. So when Herb presents, he's going to talk about the numbers that we used are based on actual studies of kennels and everything else that show a higher noise. So as you start dealing with the plane, as you start dealing with the difference and the reflection and everything else, and you're dealing with a more complicated model, that's the reason why you see the numbers shifting so much. Because again, one is a very simple, just put in the distance, put in this barrier, here you go. The other one is accounting for reflections. It's accounting for buildings that are in there and other sound paths. So the other part, which again, we haven't really addressed, is when I start looking at the numbers, our consultant came in. He did the measurements using Site Plan Essentials, which is more of an industrial used tool, and he came up with 65 dB at all the residents for 201 to 195, which would be above that volume. When we looked at the plot next to it, the business lot, it's 3 feet. So just imagine this wall is the barrier, and put 5 or 10 dogs on the other side of this, and they want to say that you're going to get underneath 70 dB over this distance to this wall. You got just a wall, it's open air. You've got a building reflecting over it. That is a substantially short distance to have that number of dogs barking. So one of the other things that was mentioned in here as well, when we're talking about the need. So we visited all the kennels. When I went to Countryside, they said their busiest days are Tuesday and Thursday, and they're generally about 20 dogs. Wednesday's a lot less, like 15. Monday and Friday, there are as few as 5. Boston Dog, when we went there, had a single dog there. Abbey Kennels has plenty of capacity. So even though, there seems to be a need with the number of dogs, most of the dog owners actually don't want to use this type of service. When we did our petition, over 70% of the people that signed our petitions stated, and I'm a dog owner. That's what they told us, and they said, I would never put my dog in this business. So that sort of says, even though you can say that you have this need and you see, we got 5,000 dogs, the perception of what this location is and what the environment is for the dogs, most dog owners don't want to use this type of service. Because again, they just want to have their dog in a different environment. Inside the noise of the kennel, that can be as high as 122 dB. And again, this is from actual scientific studies. So when you start looking at, the dogs are only going to be 90 or this, or how can we have this sort of propagation? When one dog barks, all dogs bark. I only have to look at the reason why we are so fearful. I grew up in Carlisle right next door. We recently had a kennel go in. That kennel is only 10 dogs, and I've seen the devastation on the neighbors' lives. I've seen how agitated they are. One of the persons lives 250 feet from the kennel. They have a dog. They take their dog to Countryside. They are so aggravated with living next to this kennel and the barking from 10 dogs, and those dogs are kept in all times except when they have to go. So these are dogs inside, 10, and the barking is so loud and so disruptive, the person will drive over a half hour to drop their dog off at Countryside instead of just walking it across the street. Now, they may say that we have the doomsday, we've got the ordinance, there's things that we can do. Look at the multiple years that these people have had to fight, go to town meetings, argue, call in for the noise things. It's frustration to try to put this in and then actually try to remove it and use the system and go through to make the noise reports to get the action taken. That's what we're trying to avoid. We know what it's going to be. We've seen it in other dog kennels. We've seen it people living next to these things. And again, is the numbers that we have with sophisticated software that accounts for more of the variables into this puts the numbers above what the threshold is. So I would like to turn this over, if we can, to Herb Singleton, who can address the more technical questions, to address the 65 dB and the 87 at the property line, which again is only 3 feet from where the barrier wall is, to actually answer your questions regarding how those numbers are reflected and how we came up with those. Thank you, sir. Thank you, members of the board.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, you ready, Herb?
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I will be brief, but we'll both talk about what we've done and to. I got a notice to start my video. The computer that I'm using does not have a camera, so apologies for that. To talk briefly about the report that we did and to address the comment from the applicant's consultant and engineer, we can say that. So based on the information that I had earlier this week when I did the analysis, so we basically did similar to what Jeff described. We modeled the noise from dogs barking at the outside dog run area to see the noise both at the property lines of the residences and the adjacent property line of the business to the northwest of the project. There was a question about how is it that we get numbers in the 60s versus their numbers in the 40s. I can't explain how they get their numbers. I can only explain how we get our numbers. So I used them, as David explained, I used the model Sound Plan Essentials, which is based on the ISO 9613 noise prediction algorithm. Sound Plan and the ISO algorithm are well known and widely used among our colleagues and among our industry for predicting noise. Jeff mentioned that the model he used was also based on 9613. The difference is that the Sound Plan software that we use predicts noise in 3 dimensions. So it looks at reflections off of buildings, off of pavements, and that sort of thing. But even if there's even looking at, putting aside the software, just doing a simple sound power model and looking at, starting with a sound power of 106 for one dog, and I think that's a value that Jeff and I both used. If you use that value and you can go on the internet and plug it into any number of simple sound power to sound pressure level calculators, you'll see that at about 40 to 55 meters, you get a value of about 60 to 65 decibels. So now obviously the ground elevation changes and the use of a barrier will add or subtract some numbers from that, but it's not going to cause a 20 dB difference. So I think the fact that our numbers are closer to the simple back of the envelope numbers gives more credence to the results that I generated. That said, so the number that we use for the barking dog, as Jeff mentioned, it's sound power, not sound pressure. It's a value of 106 decibels for one dog. That is based on the value in the Sound Plan library, and it's also consistent with noise levels measured by various colleagues at Noise Control Engineering and my firm, Cross Spectrum. We are both members of what's called the National Council of Acoustical Consultants. That organization has a library of different sound levels, and looking at their library of dog barking sound levels in different conditions, that is consistent with the value that I use for this report. So that's where that comes from. So like I said, our model, it takes into account reflections from the buildings, takes into account reflections from the paved areas, and it also takes into account the noise barrier and the grassy areas where there's some absorption, and that's where we get our numbers from. Again, Sound Plan is, it's a widely recognized and used model. The back of the envelope calculations that I did are consistent with the result that I got from the model, and therefore I believe that our model is fairly accurate. I will also point out that there was a drawing that was just released today that shows a site plan of the proposed project. the fence along the top of the wall, which I think is being used which is being assumed to be a noise barrier, it is noted as a 6-foot vinyl fence. And I will just note that your typical vinyl fence is not really an appropriate noise barrier. You're not going to get, vinyl fences are fairly lightweight. For a structure to block sound, it has to be fairly heavy, usually on the order of a few pounds per square foot density. Are you talking about something like a lightweight concrete or a dense wood? If they are actually planning on actually using a 6-foot vinyl fence, that right there will not be effective at all as a noise barrier. We did not account for the artificial turf that's going to be used in the dog run area, but I did run a calculation on that earlier today, and assuming that would reduce noise levels by maybe 2.5 something dB. So our numbers would still be above the 60 dB town limit at the property line. And then one last comment that I will make is that, assuming the noise barrier that they build is made out of a proper material, noise barriers work well when either the source or the receiver is closest to the barrier. And as the noise source moves further away from the barrier, that barrier works less and less. That barrier reduces less noise. So a dog right next to the barrier, that barrier will work very well. As the dog moves away from the barrier towards the northeastern end of the dog run, even though the dog is further away from the homes, the dog noise can actually get a little bit louder at the Turnpike Road homes because the barrier isn't working as well. So just something to consider. And then finally, as Dave mentioned, looking at the property line of the business to the northeast, obviously just being so close to the dog run area, the noise levels there would be extremely high. I think I calculated something around 87 dB. So that would be well above even the industrial noise limit for Chelmsford. So that was a quick run through of our report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm running around the board. Deidre, anything?
No questions.
Nothing in particular.
Henry?
No, good.
Mike?
Questions?
Okay.
He's got a good one.
Yeah, if you want to stand up to the, please state your name and address, please.
Ed Windhall, I live at 57 Davis Road in Chelmsford. I just got new to watching the planning board and the other items going on, and I'm just looking at it from everybody's point of view. It seems like there's regulations to help stop it if it does get out of line, but then people are talking about, and I could be naive, about the sound barrier on one side, but I don't know how the sound expert would say, if I get the point they're saying, is the sound's going that way, but then to get to their house, doesn't that quiet the sound down? I mean, you're talking about I could be totally wrong, but if you're talking about a wall over this way, and if I think I'm correct saying their house is over there, isn't that sound going to eventually muffle down by the time I see different things on both sides. I just want to bring it up.
If you're making a statement, that's fine, but I mean, I'm definitely not going to be answering that. Anybody else have any questions for Herb while we have him on the line? Or no, you guys are all set? All right, Herb, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Is there anyone online for the public that would like to speak? Yep.
Thank you. This has been a long journey. Many of us
Could
have-
you please state your name and address?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sarah Anderson, 199 Turnpike Road.
Thank you.
The reason that you've seen my face more times than the other residents on Turnpike Road is because our condo association represents persons who are disabled elderly, non-English speaking residents, folks who don't feel comfortable speaking up, folks who can't actually make it in public to a planning board meeting, folks who can't join by Zoom. And speaking on their behalf, it has been so hard to be so fearful of this business that's going to come in and disrupt our neighborhood. People who've lived in this community for 10 years, 15 years, 30 years in some cases, and don't have any place to go. They can't move. And the sound we're talking about, even if it meets regulations, is going to be disruptive. And it's been really hard to feel like we can communicate that when we haven't had the opportunity to really show what that's going to be like. We haven't had people come to the property, actually see what it's going to impact us who live so very close to this. And I have with me a sound at the decibel level that we will hear, yet won't be loud enough for us to do anything about. And I'm actually going to play this. Do you have the decibel measure?
This is at 65.
65. I'm going to play this for the rest of my time talking because this is what our future is going to be like. A no vote means Thais can take her business someplace else. Everything that she's done, all her hard work, can be in a place that's going to set her up for success and is going to enable a better environment for the dogs and no disruption for the neighbors. The reason this is so terrifying for the condo association is if one person or two people ask yourself, would you buy a home next to a dog kennel? Would you call a sound expert to see if it's going to bother you before you made a choice to buy the home? You wouldn't. You'd see the sign, you'd hear the dogs, and you might think twice. Maybe not all of you, but if half of you do or two of you do, then that could impact the sale of one of our homes. We are a condo association, so if my home is impacted, that means the person who has a stroke, who lives 3 houses down from me, who may feel like he needs to leave, may have a negative impact on his property value because of this situation. A no vote means Thais can take her business to a space that's better suited for the animals, that will not hurt the residents, and will set her up for success for her business. But a yes vote, saying that we want to pass this special permit, opens everyone up to potential negative consequences that are not necessary. And we've talked a lot about noise, but the overnight kennel has not been addressed. The sound inside of the building has not been addressed. The fact that she has garage doors that she could open on nice days and allow some of that sound to come out has not been addressed. But I'm not here to talk about noise because we've talked a lot about that tonight. Sure. Everyone knows the saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I believe Thais is very well intended. I believe she cares about the dogs, and I believe she wants what's best for them. But what we have become aware of through the fact that there is no state regulation for these types of businesses at the moment is that when we don't have those best practices in place to support businesses like the one she wants to open, accidents can happen. Unintentional accidents can happen because there's no best practices at the state level in place to support her. So what will happen, for example, if she puts azaleas in at this business? What she clearly doesn't seem to know is that azaleas are poisonous to dogs. Actually, all the plants that she wants to plant on her property line are poisonous to dogs. So you can look it up. It's commonly known. That's just one example of the kinds of well-intended accidents that can happen. I don't know if she has a fire safety plan for the dogs when she's going to put them in the pen with the vinyl fence and the noise cancellation, all of that stuff. What happens if something bad happens and then the dogs can't be rescued? Anyways, I'm very emotional. I'm very upset, so I'm going to stop and not take up too much of your time. But please just think about the fact that there could be a number of negative consequences that are completely avoidable And if you do not pass the special permit, all it means is she has to move to a location that may be less convenient for her because she's the building owner, but ultimately may be the better choice for everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Go ahead. Just want to give them plenty of time.
Plenty, but I have a question.
I'm not a public speaker.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with that first and foremost.
Yeah, too.
My name is John Anderson. I live at 199 Turnpike Road. Currently, my bedroom window is looking right out at this dog pen. Even with a 6-foot vinyl fence, you're going to hear it. And it's there's many discussions about decibel levels and everything else, but no one's talking about pitch. No one's talking about how the different sounds are, what the cadences are. There's a big difference between a truck or a dog. There's a difference between an air conditioner and what you're hearing. And it's just, it can't be simplified enough down to decibels. It just simply can't. And, I'm a video editor, so I work from home. I've been working from home now for 2 or 3 years. And, because I'm a sound editor, I understand sound, and I'm very sensitive to sound. That's my career. That's what I do. And as such, the dog barks that you heard on the recording earlier today were actually recorded outside of kennels in town. I recorded them myself. And I won't name which kennels, but those were just me parking my car outside of these facilities and observing it for myself. And that is audio that I captured. So I'm being told it's based that there is no opinion, that there will be barking heard outside of the town kennels. I've heard it. I've heard it myself. I've recorded it several times, and we've submitted those videos to the board. I don't know if they've been seen or if they have not been seen, because I know there's been a lot of material that has been sent and a lot of material that's been reviewed. But anyways, I'll move on to the point. COVID. This year, everyone has been home. And because everyone has been home, everyone is appreciating their homes more than they ever did before. They've become our restaurants. They become our places to go. They've become more important to us than they ever have been. People are working from home. My wife is working from home now. It is not as simple as daytime applications happening across the street and not disturbing us. It's going to disturb us. And, I take conference calls on the deck. I take conference calls from my front yard. I take them from my garage if it's too sunny over there. I'm all over the place in my home. And now I'm being possibly denied the right to be able to use my home as my space, as my personal space, by something that could be violating that. I'm being told I won't hear this. I will hear this, and there's no denying that. And as much as you can say that 65 decibels, when Herb was speaking on the speaker earlier, he was at 65 decibels. Could you hear him? Yes, you could. And it was very clear that you could hear him. And we all hear, you hear me right now. I don't know what I'm speaking at right now, but that's relative to the calculations that Herb came up with. But since this has started, as my wife kind of said, it's been sleepless nights. It's been a lot of fear. We value our home. The real estate market is crazy right now. And if we wanted to sell our home, yeah, sure, it'll sell. But where are we going to go is going to be far more expensive. And it's because we can't live across the street from a place like this. And you have to ask yourselves, do you want to live across the street from this? Would you want to live near this? Would you want to listen to this? Would you want to smell this? Would you want any of this? And no, the answer is no. I've asked friends, I've asked peers, I've asked all sorts of people, and that is an issue for many, many people. And, and when I was part of a walkthrough very early on in this process, when the planning board said, sort it out with your neighbors, we raised concerns. We had many concerns. I said, I hear people playing basketball across the street. I was told, no, they don't do that. They don't do that over there. So if everything that I brought up with noise complaints and everything else was denied an ear then, why will they hear it if they were applied the special permit? Why would it be heard? So I feel like already from the beginning of this, my voice was not heard. So what makes me think as a citizen that I need to trust this business that needs to listen to me with something as sensitive as animals and animal lives? It just doesn't compute with me. And being dismissed, it was very emotional to me. And to our peers and to our neighbors. So that led us to canvass people because I felt unheard. I felt unheard by the planning board. I felt unheard by the building owners. So I took it on myself and our neighbors, and we canvassed people. We didn't want to disturb people to the fullest degree. We only did this for one weekend because we didn't want to be knocking on doors and disturbing everybody. And we gathered 70 to 80 signatures. Every single person said they oppose this application. They do not want this in their neighborhood. They do not want to hear this. They do not want any of the negative repercussions that can come from that. The opinion was unanimous, and we didn't contact all the abutters. And we have about 40 residents within our condo association. Only half signed that petition. There are more signatures that go beyond us. It's the neighborhoods and the neighboring people who may not be here tonight, but when I feel unheard, I feel it necessary that I speak on behalf of these people that I met. People are very prideful of their homes here. They care, but they're also afraid. They're very afraid that what they value, which is their homes, is going to be, they're not going to be able to enjoy it as much as they do. They're not going to be able to appreciate it as much as they do. And there's a lot of pride in that. But people are fearful of these types of decisions, and these things need to be thought of, and they need to be weighed accordingly. And the opinion is just unanimous with that. And my wife touched on the fact that many of these people did have dogs. When we walked around, we met lots of dogs. We petted lots of dogs too, because I love dogs. I have one myself. He's epileptic. And, you know, and it's just, the opinion was I would never bring my dog here. They don't want to bring their dogs to these types of places. Some people do need them, but not all of them do. And the people in this neighborhood, emphatically, the ones with dogs, are saying no, they don't want to do that. And it's just, you know, people should not have to be left with this level of fear over a decision that you know is so out of our control. I mean, we've been raising our concerns. We've been sending letters. We feel like we're a bother. We've reached out to the planning board. No one followed through with doing a site visit at the location. And that,
First of all, that's false.
well, not that we were aware of.
Well, we said it at meetings, but let's not get into that. Finish your.
Okay. But yes, we tried to reach out with personal inquiries because we feel unheard. We didn't hear back. And, you know, I feel like there needs to be a two-way street with this type of communication. And we need to feel good about the decisions that are being made here. And we do need to feel like we have a voice, and we haven't felt like we have. And people just simply want to be heard. And these people, 80 people that we got signatures of, including ourselves, they feel this way. And they shouldn't have to be nervous about this type of decision making when a business can be toxic in their own homes. And you know, there was a situation too where a realtor letter was provided from Attorney Eliopoulos, and she wrote a letter that said my cousin moved in front of a dog kennel, and they love it. They love looking out their window. That's an oversimplification of what our concerns are. Because we have letters from realtors as well, including the realtor who owned our home previous, who said, I would not buy this house. I wouldn't buy this house if there was dogs or if there was a kennel across the street. If people, when they look at their house on Google Maps and they see a kennel across the street, they're not going to want to buy it. And that in and of itself is just something that needs to be considered when we're so close to this kennel. I mean, my window looks at this kennel. I see this from, right now. And I just think that needs to be considered. And I just ask that the decision is made for what is best for the community and the people who don't have a voice that I'm speaking for tonight, and consider this application that can be less harmful in other areas. They can submit. They can put it in a place that doesn't abut 120 feet from a residential window. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify a couple things. One, just because you sent us something doesn't mean we didn't read it. I didn't respond back saying I received it. Attorney Eliopoulos or other people send us stuff. We don't send them back emails saying I received it and saying go into discussion with them. Or because I didn't want to talk on the phone call because I had a lot of people emailing me, asked to speak on the phone. I also have a life and a job and things like that. I did review everything you sent, just like I did for them. And I'm sure the other members did the same. So I think that you have it wrong, that we don't care and that we're not paying attention to it, because that's not the truth.
It's just
Matter of fact, we were insulted many times by a couple of people, that the planning board's not run well and everything else. I still read everything. So I read that too. So we hear you loud and clear. And we are still reviewing everything that you said. But we're not going to respond back to you. Just, we just can't. There's too much.
We appreciate the acknowledgement.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Is there anyone else from the public? Actually, Mike, you had something you wanted to
Well,
ask?
I just wanted to clarify, that recording that you played, that was at 65 dB?
It was when I checked it on my device.
Okay. I would be interested in hearing it played at 50 or 55.
You do that?
Yeah, I figured you could probably just knock it down. I'm just kind of curious to see what it sounds like. Because one of the things we have a debate here on is just exactly what the noise level would be. Is it? Yeah.
This is at the source.
No, I'd like it over there. I'd like to be able to compare them.
Okay.
For effect from the same point.
So that's what?
This is, 1 second, let me.
1 second.
Thank you.
This is 50 at the source.
Okay, now, and another, I have a question for council, town council, which he probably wasn't expecting, but might as well leave that on while we talk to town council, just to get a sense of what that means, if we could do that now.
Is he on?
He was. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about 19539, that's the noise standard portion of the bylaws. It's got, it's what sets the 60 dBA limit. But it also has an exception in it for intermittent noise. Do we have any sense or any practical information as to whether a dog bark, which seems to me to be rather intermittent, although, is that considered intermittent, which would be a 70 dB expectation, or continuous, like a truck or an engine, which apparently would be 60? Do you have any sense? Have we ever encountered this question before?
I have never encountered this question before. I do note that it states for a period not to exceed 20 minutes during any one day.
Okay. How you measure even that 20 minutes, I'm not sure how you do that, but.
I don't know either.
Yeah, okay. It was a matter of curiosity, but that gave me an opportunity also to see what a conversation was like with the 55 dB in the background. Thanks.
Yeah. So I would note that there is a separate noise standard under the DEP requirements.
Yep.
So the DEP noise policy states that an increase above 10 decibels above ambient at the property line constitutes a noise nuisance. So I don't think either sound expert addressed that. I think they
That's
limited
true, what the ambient would be.
Yeah, they limited their analysis to the town bylaw rather than to the state requirement.
Okay, thanks.
David Lasky, 3 Milestone. Just one little point. When we just did the demonstration at 65 here, the sound's going to be a lot less of what you
course it
hear.
is. I understand that.
Of course it is.
50.
Yeah,
We understand that.
So just wanted to make sure that was understood. Thank you.
Yep.
yeah.
And this is only 4 dogs.
Can we just turn that off?
Yeah, we're all set.
Really, you don't want to listen to it? It's so funny. I can't imagine why.
It's a little grating.
Hi, Jessica Porter, 5 Milestone Avenue. So the only thing I want to add that I do believe is new since our last meeting with you, and I believe there was a letter sent at some point in your packets from State Representative Brian Ash regarding Ollie's Law. This leads into somewhat of what Ms. Anderson spoke to earlier about the current lack of any state oversight and regulations of dog kennels. So this bill is pending. It was just filed recently as a result of a unfortunate puppy that was mauled at a doggy daycare facility out in western Massachusetts, which brought to light the issues with dog daycares, kennels, and the lack of licensing issues. So I just wanted to make sure that that was brought to the attention of both the board as well as the public, that this is definitely ties into a lot of the concerns that we have as well about the care and the welfare of the animals. I was pleased to hear that the applicant was looking at staffing ratios of, I think it was 1 to 5 dogs, which is great because the legislation proposed does look at addressing things like that. However, as a human resources professional, I will say that it's in this market with post-COVID, it's actually extremely difficult finding people to fill jobs right now. Hopefully that gets better. I've been doing HR for 14 plus years, mostly at the municipal level, including serving actually here in Chelmsford as the chair of the personnel board. And this is definitely an overlying issue. I have trouble attracting people for municipal jobs, some of them that even include pensions. So I do think that the applicant will have some difficulties in terms of finding people. I love that she's desiring to have these greater staffing ratios, but I think she may be hard pressed to actually find the people willing to do the work, at least in the immediate future. So that kind of coupled with the pending legislation, it might be more prudent if the applicant does step back and consider this, see what regulations might come out of this bill, if it gets any legs, and then go from there, as things might drastically change in terms of what will be needed and required to run a kennel based on what's needed and required as of today. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Do we have anyone online at all? No. Okay, so I'll bring it around the board. We'll start over there with you, Mike. You have any questions or
The only question I had was on the drawing, and I know Katie didn't get a chance. It's Katie, this is yours, right? Yes. Why are you taking a lot of the mature trees out and putting all new trees in, the 4 to 8 foot arborvitaes? I understand that because of the property line for sound.
The trees that are there now, I guess, Thais had went out there and looked at the health of those trees, and the health is really bad. And basically the bottom parts of the tree.
Oh, if you don't mind, Katie,
Oh,
please.
So, excuse me, sorry. So the trees were noted by Thais's landscaper that they were unhealthy, and also that the bottom part of the trees were open essentially, so there wasn't anything underneath. So I know she contacted the town DPW to make sure they weren't the town's. The town went out and took a look at them, said they weren't theirs. She said, what I'd really like to do is take them out, and they were required as part of our previous site plan, and put in arborvitaes, which will grow, you know, essentially from the ground up and provide that additional screen. So that's why she decided.
And then she's putting along the front, she's taking out the, she's putting in these pear cherry trees.
Right,
What is
those
the
are
size of
similar.
them? You know?
I don't, but I could.
It says 30 feet on center, but it doesn't say height. I mean, it
Yep. So we would propose that. I believe the bylaw calls out a diameter of tree that's required to be put there, and we could add that as a condition.
well, we'll leave that to Nancy's expertise, so. No, I just have, I don't have any questions, I have concerns about it, and I just think under the special permit 195, 103, when you read the full description of what we're looking at in one of the criterias, it says that special permits shall be granted by the special permit granting authority unless otherwise specified herein, only upon its written determination that the adverse effects of the proposed use will not outweigh its beneficial impacts to the town or the neighborhood. And I think, and then the rest of it is what the attorney mentioned in the 6 criterias. But I think the key piece of this here is the neighborhood.
Yep.
So that's just,
Okay, thank you, Mike, appreciate it. Henry? Erica? Mike?
Good so far.
Nancy?
Yeah, good so far.
Indeed.
No questions.
Questions?
Paul?
Oh,
Paul's
Paul.
online.
No, no question.
Sorry, Paul.
Sorry.
Forgot you.
Sorry for not being there.
No,
No
you look
questions.
so comfortable.
Is Erica voting on the special permit?
No, you need 7.
7, okay.
You're the short one, she can vote.
All right, I'm not sure if they want to do a straw poll to see where we're at here, or you want to, I mean.
I don't think we have any more comments.
that's
I
it.
think it's
Any
time to.
motions, or-
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right? That's all unanimous, and then we need,
Do we have any discussion before the taking a vote? Do we need any discussion before taking a vote?
do you have anything for us? Do you have any
Well,
comments?
I guess I can make some comments. I don't know how much you'll appreciate it, but I'll make some comments. This is an industrial property. It's an industrial zone. And the neighborhood we're looking at here is an industrial zone. There are a lot of uses permitted in this industrial zone, and while this may not be a use that is desirable in a residential zone, it is an accepted use in an industrial zone as much as any other use that could go into this building. And it's unfortunate that industrial zones have peripheries, and those peripheries almost always sit up against residential zones. But the periphery of an industrial zone is still an industrial zone. This industrial zone has been in place since, I think, the mid-1960s. This development has been there since the mid-1980s. So while I certainly feel from the neighbors, and I certainly want to hear from them, the fact is they built and bought properties that are adjacent to an industrial zone and all the potential uses that can go into an industrial zone. The applicant has every expectation of owning a building to be able to use it for permitted uses. And this is a permitted use. As much as a distribution facility with trucks coming and going constantly would be a permitted use here. As much as a landscaping yard with all of its equipment could be a permitted use here. This is an industrial property. We have asked the applicant to address a lot of issues in order to make it as palatable as possible for an adjacent residential zone. And I think they've gone out of their way to do that. They've put in acoustic muffling materials. They've put in state-of-the-art ground coverings for their yard. I don't know what else they can do to make this, to mitigate any of the risks involved in the use of this property. But I think that if this board finds that an industrial property cannot be used for an industrial use because it's adjacent to a residential property, we're doing a disjustice to all the money that we're spending in this town trying to bring businesses into our industrial property. And that's my 2 cents.
Mike? Yeah. Hey, well, first thing I'd like to say, I really appreciate data. And at least on the noise thing, we had data from both the proponents and the opponents. I appreciate it both. I like to chew on that sort of thing and, get a refresher course in acoustics. It's been 50 years. And frankly, for me, I agree with a lot of what Nancy said. Also, it basically comes down for me to what is the nature of the noise going to be here. And my sense, based on the data and the analyses that we've gotten, and my own experience, I got 2 dogs, and they go off when the mailman shows up or when I turn on the evil vacuum cleaner. And I know what that sounds like. My feeling and sense is that the noise issue is not going to be nearly as severe as some of the neighbors fear. I hope I'm correct. I actually believe that I'm correct. And for that matter, I'm inclined to support this special permit. Okay, Erica? Henry?
I hear what Nancy says. This is allowed use with a special permit. And that's, it's allowed use with a special permit. So this is not just, you can say it's allowed use, but it's only with a special permit. Basically it comes down to the board members have to decide the criteria that Mike has said next to me and the counselor said, and does it come to that point? So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna vote no.
Do you have any comments or discussion on it?
No, I agree with a number of things that have been said. I do have one other concern that hasn't really been brought up, actually, which is the drop-off and the pickup. So I have a concern that if there's 40 dogs, and they're both being dropped off and picked up, so that's 2 round trips, which I know Phil suggested that was not a significant amount because of the number of trips on the road. But if you figure that it takes about, say, 3 minutes per car to drop off a dog and, go inside and make the trade-off, there's however many parking spaces. But I know usually in my experience, it would seem kind of like a daycare drop-off, and usually, there's like a line, and somebody greets the people dropping off your child, and you hand them off. So I guess I don't know if the cars are coming as a line versus if they're coming and parking and going in. If they're coming as a line, it would take less time, but it would take more space.
I think Mike, didn't you ask that question? I think they said they would come in and
Okay,
bring in the
so if they're coming in and out, then they're gonna have, say, most of the people are gonna drop off their dogs between whatever, 7:30 and 9:30, 4:30 and 6:30. And so I would have the concern that there'd be a backup of standing traffic down the hill, the blind hill that everyone spoke about in terms of traffic. If you do have standing traffic on Mill Road, which I would be concerned about, on Turnpike, then I think, or on down all the way to Mill Road, I think that would be a significant menace to moving forward in going along your day if you have to traverse that route. So that's a concern. And another concern I have is there is just across the street a group home for disabled adults. And I feel like that's a population that it would be particularly vulnerable to adverse impact by dog noise. And that I haven't heard kind of mentioned by anyone, and I find that a concern to me.
Thank you. I have many of the concerns that, Paul, sorry. Jeez, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I saw your mug there, too. Go ahead, Paul.
I have no comment.
All right. Well, I have the similar concerns as Deidre and Mike, and yes, it is an industrial, but it also does border residential, and they're there, and we do have to consider that. And looking at the different things, I do think traffic noise. So I know where I'm going to be. So, anyone has a motion?
So Tim, why would this traffic cause more noise than the regular traffic on Middlesex?
We didn't mention the fact that there is other space in the property, so we're just talking about just that business, 40. So we got to add, there's other space upstairs, there's more tenants, there's more customers, there's more people. So that's my feeling on that. Any other questions for me?
Yeah, I'm just curious why, with the amount of traffic on Middlesex, why these additional cars would make any difference whatsoever. That's all, because it's such a small percentage of the overall traffic.
It is, but it's additional, isn't it? And then we're gonna have the additional from that. That's that's actually just one piece of my.
Okay.
So.
No, it's this discussion period.
Yeah,
so,
I got you.
yeah.
I got you.
All right.
Yeah.
So you want a motion, or you going to say something, Mike?
No, I'm not going to say anymore. I'll move or you move.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
You're the statement.
Well, I guess
there.
the only way to put the motion is as a positive statement.
Positive.
So I move that we grant the special permit.
And I will take notes.
I'll second.
And you'll second, okay.
Okay, all in favor? We'll go Mike Walsh.
No.
Okay, Henry?
No.
Erica?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mike?
Yes.
Mike is a yes. Okay, I am a no.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
And Paul.
And Paul?
Yeah, yes. I'm in favor, yes.
Okay, Paul. So what do we have? 3 and
4-3.
4-3.
4-3.
Motion fails.
Motion.
Motion fails.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for all your time. I know it was a long one.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
patience, it's very much appreciated.
I think we're all set with the attorney. Anyone else?
What's the next one look like?
Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Thanks an awful lot, Paul. Thanks for answering my one question, sort of.
Phil?
Justified
all the
looking at
efforts
it.
to-
Yeah, I bet that one. I bet you've never heard that one before.
Paul, are we all set with the document that I
How
sent you
about
earlier?
Tobin Ave, is there something that he needs to say on that or anything?
I don't know. Were you gonna say something on the Mary Ave?
Paul, can you hear us?
I can.
Did you have anything to say on Mary Ave off of Tobin?
I did point out that there was a mistake in the date in the document.
I didn't understand. I didn't hear what you said. A mistake where?
There was a mistake in the date, on one of the recording date on the document, it said like 2002.
All right.
Okay.
Presumably it was date recorded in 2020, not 2002.
I see it. So we fixed
So
that. We're
that I
good.
seem to track the standard form.
All right, so
Anything else for Paul? Do you need him tonight, rest of the
we
night?
need a minute. I don't think so.
No.
So, thank you, Paul.
Free clear.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us.
All right, next up is the Mary Ave off Tobin, request to endorse private way covenant. SGC Development LLC requests an endorsement of the form covenant private way. Someone here from the applicant?
No, this is what Paul just mentioned.
Oh, okay, so that's,
So we're all
we don't
set.
need to make it
He looked it over and we're good. If
Okay.
you guys want to take a vote.
even better. Yep.
I'll make a vote to approve the endorsement for the private way covenant.
I will second.
Mary
With-
Ave off of Tobin.
With the change.
Date change.
With the date change.
Date change.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
Sign it right after we fix it.
Okay. Meeting minutes, you have on here. Next. you
Except they're on
want-
the back of the,
Yep. Everyone
the
get a
agenda?
chance to review them?
it's not a big
See
deal.
anything horrible?
And if we can get a motion,
I will move to
What
approve.
about 133 Ferguson Street?
No,
What?
the minutes were ahead of that.
yeah, it's
meeting
also
minutes.
ahead of it on, yeah.
I'll give you a motion to approve the minutes of March 24th.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Just vote if we were there.
Yeah. Unanimous.
Yep.
All right, and next up, 133 Princeton Street, request for a COID applicability finding. Callahan LLC. 133 Princeton Street, request a finding of COID applicability for the property located at 133 Princeton Street. The property is a split lot with the front portion being zoned CB roadside commercial and the rear portion being zoned RA residential.
Well, good evening, members of the board. Nice to see you all. It's certainly nice to be seen and without masks. It's
Seen and
great.
not viewed,
Great.
yeah.
Feels strange to be here after so long, but happy to be here, representing Callahan LLC with respect to the property at 133 Princeton Street. My client, with me this evening, Katie Enright from Howard Stein Hudson, the engineer on the project. We're here this evening seeking a determination of applicability under your CEI bylaw. My client is currently under contract to purchase the property at 133 Princeton Street and would like to redevelop the property as a retail liquor store. It's an interesting lot. It's a split lot with the front portion of it being located in the roadside commercial CB district. And the very the back part of the portion is actually in the RA zoning district. I guess that's typical of a lot of those lots along Princeton Street. We'd like to redevelop this under your CEID bylaw by placing the existing building in the CB zone, or it will be constructed within the CB zone. As many of you know, this existing building is in significant disrepair. It's been condemned for some time and quite frankly an eyesore, so it would be good to see it redeveloped. I do believe that the project is eligible under your CEIOD section 195, 111A, as the existing structure is proposed to be completely redeveloped within the CB district. And it also qualifies under section 195.11B, 1 and 2. As one, the project will alter a pre-existing non-conforming structure. That thing has all sorts of non-conformities with respect to side lot lines and front lot lines. None of those pre-existing non-conformities are being carried forward because the use has been abandoned for greater than 2 years. So we would be proposing a conforming structure. And also it qualifies as, I think we can all agree, the property is currently vacant, obsolete, and well underutilized. So quite frankly, I think the redevelopment of this site is directly on point with respect to the purpose and intent of the CEIOD bylaw, and I think it would be a great example of utilizing that bylaw to get a new building on the site. So with that, I'd like to ask Katie to give you just quick overview of what the proposal, at least at this point, is looking like. We haven't finalized anything, but there we go. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Colleen. That's probably the most telling picture of the site.
Let's look.
Katie Enright again with Howard Stein Hudson, working with this applicant who's looking to develop basically a high-class liquor store here. He's looking at almost a 12,000 square foot retail store with the other 2 floors, one above and one below, being for warehouse storage of product. So the building itself would be 2 stories from the front. We would drop down slightly in the back because the building, about halfway through the building, we're within the floodplain. And essentially, we're looking to, again, as Doug stated, the building that's out there today is about a foot off the property line. We're looking at putting a new building about approximately 11 feet off the property line. That's one of the special permits that we would need moving forward. Under the CEIOD bylaw. The other special permit that we would require would be for floor area ratio, being up at 0.62, and that falls under the CEIOD also. What's interesting about this is certainly there's a significant amount of space here it's really just for warehousing product. There's no intention to put additional employees in those warehousing spaces. It's really just for stuff. So when we looked at the parking based upon the retail use itself. Certainly within the CEIOD, it does ask that parking be not between the building and the street, but it's super important for parking to be along the street frontage when we're dealing with a retail type user. So we're looking at parking in the front of the building, just 2 rows of parking as you come in. And then essentially we're looking at putting some additional parking in the rear of the site so that we have a total of 52 spaces on the site itself. So we are asking for a parking reduction purely based upon the way that your bylaw is written. You have to add up basically all of the uses, so the warehouse uses would also require parking. But in essentially real life, what V is looking to do here is just really employ the liquor store itself and have people working within the liquor store. And Doug mentioned also there's an existing parking lot that's behind the building in the RA zoning district. So that's why we've kind of moved everything to the front of the lot, both to avoid floodplain as much as possible and to just essentially use that RA district as a continuation of a use of a parking lot that exists there today. So with that, just to add a little bit of clarification, the loading bay we have is on the side of the building, and that is just the best place to put it based upon moving a tractor trailer truck through this lot and kind of getting it out of the way and allowing all the parking in aisles to be used. So certainly this plan would be developed further. There's a significant amount of work that would need to be done, but we're here tonight seeking just the applicability for this project to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to all of you.
Okay, excellent. And so that's what we're here for tonight, applicability. So well, let's bring it around. We'll start with Mike.
The only question I have, Katie, is where the tractor trailer is in the loading dock, is that the area that's on the south, the bottom of the page?
It is.
Right there?
So it moves around, it pulls up, and it backs into that
So it
area.
backs in it, so
and then
cars can
pulls
still get
out
by?
straight.
Cars
Cars can still get by, correct, yep.
That's all I have, so. That's all I have.
I think it's great for the location. We are kind of relooking at landscaping because we're disappointed on a few projects. There may be changes in criteria. Just be aware we'll be looking for, you're on a main street. We want it to look nice. That's my only comment.
No comment other than seems like a good choice. I went to high school down there, not that long ago, but longer than I'd like to admit, down that way. And I remember driving past that empty building all the way back in high school. So I think that says something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of a better example of where we ought to use the CEIOD. Yeah, that building is a mess. I want to emphasize what Henry said, which is that we really are having a look at the street view of all of this stuff. So we're likely to be getting a little more picky than we have been in the past about how it looks, but I know that you guys have resources that are very good at that, so taking care of that. Other than that, I think it's high time that thing got replaced.
Thank you, Mike. Nancy?
Yeah, I've been driving past there and thinking that, I was amazed that somebody wasn't buying it up and building something, although I'm really surprised it's not housing. But yeah, I don't have any
Deidre?
issues.
I think I like it. I guess my only concern, and it's not really a concern for this board, but I am kind of curious, is there a available liquor license?
I believe they already have it. Check with Doug, I believe they already received it from.
An existing store moving over? Or?
No, I believe it's my understanding that they have the license from Vinyl Square. That's been obtained.
Okay.
But I can clarify that.
Like the rest of the board, I feel the same. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Oh, Paul? Let's hear Paul.
Don't forget Paul.
I don't know how I can miss him. Sorry, Paul.
I agree. It's about time. About time.
Excellent, thank you. So we all agree. Get a motion.
Motion to find applicability for the COID for 133 Princeton, is it?
You have my second.
Second by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
61.
Yep. New public hearing, 61 Dunstable Road. COID application, Christopher and Kelly Sullivan, for the construction of a 3-unit residential building and associated site improvements. The site is located in CD General Commercial Zoning District and is shown as parcel ID 9, Block 10, Lot 4, consisting of approximately 0.58 acres. The applicant requests approval under Article 21, Community Enhancement and Investment Overlay District, COID, subsections 195-111, 195-116B, and any other permit relief as may be required under the Chelmsford zoning bylaw to allow the proposed use project.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Douglas DeShane of Finneran and Nicholson. I forgot to mention, I am now an associate with Finneran and Nicholson.
I saw that on the letter.
DeShane and Farrell has been dissolved, and I am now working with Finneran and Nicholson. We have offices in Westford and in Newburyport, so
Very nice.
a lot of travel lately.
Yeah.
We're here this evening, and with me tonight, Brian Goudreau from Hancock Associates, representing Christopher and Kelly Sullivan. They're the owners of the property. You'll recall, we were here some time ago to seek applicability determination, and we're here this evening to present the resulting project from that approval. Technically, we are here seeking approval to build a 3-unit residential structure as is required by your CEIOD bylaw. However, as I have stated previously, and as I have stated in my cover letter, it is our client's desire to actually construct 2 units. They own the existing 2-family home next door to this lot. They own both of the lots, and they wanted to develop this second lot, which certainly none of us can blame them. However, as we know, that neighborhood is predominantly single-family. There are some duplexes and actually a few multifamilies in the general area, but it's clearly a residentially dictated area. And so my clients wanted to build something that would be conforming to the neighborhood and quite frankly to their house next door. So they didn't want to develop or see the property developed as commercial, but rather residential. So where we did qualify under the CEIOD, and technically we are required to seek approvals of a 3-unit, that is how we've applied. But as I've been upfront about, that's not really what we'd like to do. So I have worked with town council and staff, planning staff, to see if there, if this could be done. And while there is certainly not an authority to allow the board to waive that, you do have the authority to condition projects. And so I am asking on behalf of my clients that if the board would consider approval of this project, we would voluntarily and respectfully ask that you condition any such approval on requiring that we build only 2 units. That is a condition that my client would not only accept, but appreciate. Because they really do want to build this to match the neighborhood and to not overburden. And I do believe the board would have the authority to make that condition, again, after speaking with council, if you so desire. So I would like to let Brian give you an overview of what we've come up with and we've proposed. You recall we had to make sure we had the 25-foot setbacks, and we've done a lot of work on drainage and stormwater management, even though technically a project of this size doesn't, isn't subject, if I understand, to the full. We know we wanted to make the neighbors comfortable that we had addressed it, so Brian will give you the facts and figures on what we're doing and what we're doing for drainage.
Thank you. So for the record, Brian Goodrow with Hancock Associates. We have a duplex that is being proposed on this site. Just to touch base on a couple of the technical aspects, as Doug indicated, we're not subject to stormwater management. We're not subject to a local stormwater bylaw. We're here technically for site plan approval under the CEIOD, but it's a 2-family building, basically. So the site slopes from Dunstable Road down to the rear. There's a catch basin located directly in front of the project. We've basically graded our site such that the house and the front yard slope towards that catch basin, so we're not shedding runoff to any of the abutters. The roof drains are being handled by underground infiltration systems, so there's not going to be any direct gutter downspouts. There is a septic system to the rear of the building that's proposed. We went out there with the Board of Health's consultants, had witness Title V testing done, and designed the system that's on the plan. So all the grading reflects on-site septic, because as the town engineer indicated, we are in a state of sewer moratorium. So we can't connect to the sewer that's directly in front of this property. So we've made provisions for on-site wastewater treatment. Again, duplex, enough parking, there's garages interior to the building. Other utilities are taken care of within Dunstable Road. It's overhead power, there's gas in Dunstable, and obviously municipal water. With that said, unless, Doug, you have anything else, we're happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you. We have some letters that we'll go through real quick.
All right, we have a letter from the Fire Prevention Office. They have comments. They said it complies with S27 CMR 1, Chapter 18 for fire department access for 1 and 2 family dwellings. And it must apply to E911 for an address. We have a letter from the Board of Health that has no comments, which I would expect that we would get comments. We have a letter from the Water Department that says, see attached letter, duplex or triplex. Dear board members, the North Chelmsford Water District has reviewed the applicants, Christopher and Kelly Sullivan, 61 Dunstable Road, North Chelmsford, Massachusetts, for the construction of a new 3-unit residential building. The North Chelmsford Water District requires that each unit will have a separate sleeved 1-inch water service and separate water meter. Each unit will be required to pay a system development charge of $5,000 per unit. Sincerely, Bruce Harper, Superintendent. We have a letter from the Police Department, no comments. Oh my.
They do put in big
It's a poster.
She's out of glasses.
It's a poster.
Proclamation.
Really? All right, so let's see who this is from. This is from the Department of Public Works. Subject, Planning Board File 2021-02, 61 Dunstable Road, duplex. Dear members, this office has reviewed the site plan by Hancock Associates dated May 11th, 2021, and a project letter dated May 11th, 2021. As a result of this review, this office has the following comments. 1. This department shall be notified when work on site is to commence in order to arrange for inspections. 2. The applicant shall mitigate stormwater runoff from the roof. Any revision to the drainage system shall be submitted and approved by this office. 3. A site as-built shall be provided upon completion of the work on site. As-built to include a letter from the engineer stating that all stormwater devices have been built to industry standards. Provide any supporting documents or calculations. The as-built shall be from a ground survey and submitted in AutoCAD and paper form. 4. Confirmatory testing shall be performed in the area of infiltration per stormwater management guidelines. Testing shall be witnessed by the Chelmsford DPW Engineering Division. All unsuitable material, if any, discovered in the excavation for the infiltration system shall be removed and disposed of in accordance with state and local regulations. 5. Erosion control shall be installed prior to any earth disturbance. 6. The sewer moratorium imposed by the Chelmsford Department of Public Works that became effective on September 15th, 2020, will apply to this project because it contains a new duplex that was not applied for prior to the effective date of the moratorium. Since the moratorium is applicable, they are not allowed to tie into the town's sewer system and will require an on-site sewer disposal system. 7. A road opening permit is required from the Chelmsford DPW Highway Division for work within the Dunstable Road right-of-way. 8. Trench permits shall be filed as necessary per 520 CMR 14.00, Chapter 82A. 9. The design engineer has received design and drafting review comments from this office. So there's something else out there. If you have any questions, please contact this office at 978-250-5228. Sincerely, Christine Papadopoulos, Town Engineer, Town of Chelmsford, DPW.
All right. Anybody, we'll go around the board, anybody with questions or comments? We did go through this, remember back, yeah.
Yeah.
I have no issue making it.
Does anybody have any issues? Paul?
Yeah, as
Anyone
long as
make a motion?
Christine's
Yeah,
looked at
I'll
the drainage.
move that we grant it.
Second.
We have
A second.
It is
yeah.
a public hearing.
Oh, a public
Oh.
hearing, yes. Anybody from the public? Anybody online?
Silence is deafening. Anybody online?
No, just the applicant.
Make a
Make a motion to close
close
it.
the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Make a motion to make it a condition that the project be a two-family and not a three-family.
Excellent. Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, but I think we
You
have.
still
site
have to
plan
approve it.
review And special permit, right?
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah.
So what else do we need?
So you still need a.
Need another,
yeah, so,
Yeah.
of the project, sections 111D and
so do you want to make a motion?
You get it in front of me so I can take it correctly.
Yeah.
I think you've got the glasses on now.
no, this is-
Okay. Well,
Three distance, and then get over to the next page.
okay,
Where's this one?
okay, we
Mike,
got
you
two
wanna do
things.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I move that we grant approval under Article 21 CEIOD and subsections 195, 111D, 5, 195, 116B, and any other, well,
No.
and any other permit relief as may be required, but I don't think there is any.
No. All
No, and I don't want to do any other that's not defined.
Okay, I think that's a
I
very good
agree.
point. We'll leave that.
So end it after,
Yeah,
If there's something else in there, then you can come back and get it
Yep.
approved.
okay.
agreed.
Second, without the,
Second by Henry, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
well, thank you very
Bingo.
much.
Thank you.
That was the
See you
easiest
all.
thing all night.
Congrats.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you, Brian.
I know we have a couple other things. I've got to get going back to the firehouse, so
Okay.
I don't think,
I think we're done.
we,
that's it.
Nothing, well, we
No,
have to
we're
move
done.
to continue the public hearing for One Bill Rica.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
like, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Got it. And would you
So,
like another motion?
I move that we postpone any discussion on the work session until the next meeting.
well, what about having another work session?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, about
Yeah.
like next Wednesday for another work
Next Wednesday works for me.
Works for me.
Okay.
Next Wednesday?
session.
I'll be there.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'll be
Yeah, I
here,
just
but
don't know
that's
if
okay.
I'm-
I
I
think
don't
we've
know.
got some work, things that we could get
Yeah, we
done
got.
Yeah.
without them. Real quickly, just a couple of things that I had thought of is when Evan had suggested to us that we could take and do something about increasing the plant size on some more
Yeah.
of our critical
Let's
sites.
discuss that.
And I
Let's
think
take a
that's,
look
that
at
can be
it.
done administratively pretty easy. I would like to take and have engineering there and talk about these water gardens and how we're supposed to be handling this stuff, because that one project I showed you the pictures of the neighbor
Yeah.
with the grass in the front, I'm there during the downpour the other day. It looked beautiful. They didn't have curbing. They had, the water flew into the grass and disappeared.
sank.
And that's how you're supposed to get rid of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Instead of
Gotta
putting
get
it into the
next door,
ground.
so you wanna make a
Yep.
motion?
Okay, well then I will, that done.
Make a
we have-
motion.
We have a motion to have a meeting next Wednesday.
A work session next Wednesday.
Okay. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I
Motion to
move.
approve.
Motion to approve what?
Motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
See ya.
Aye.
We'll see you later. Ken.
Good night.
Thank you.